So here today to talk about Security Centric's Managed Vulnerability Program. Can you tell me what are the benefits of running a Managed Vulnerability Programs?
They already have something to scan for vulnerabilities in their environment, or maybe they don't. But I guess there's a big difference between just scanning for something, looking at the results, and not really actioning any of them. And how do you even know where to begin? Overall, obviously, the benefits of vulnerability scanning in general, you've got assets out there, you've got workstations, you've got servers on-prem in the cloud, wherever they might be, on an operating system that was on it when you installed the thing you needed.
Yep.
Running a version of systems and processes and applications on it that may have not been patched up.
Sure.
So really it's about how do you find devices within your environment and understand the vulnerabilities that exist, the things that you're running. Operating system vulnerabilities, application vulnerabilities. We even talk about like shadow IT, where someone's able to install their own apps on a workstation.
Okay.
How do you pick up vulnerabilities in things that maybe you haven't deployed or you're aware of? How do you even get an asset inventory of those things?
Yeah.
So really when we talk about management programs, it's the whole overarching category. Run the scans, collect the data, and then do something with it. So I guess the biggest benefit is knowing where to start. We often find when someone's done this the first time, or coming in and sort of not sure where to begin, right? So you do a vulnerability scan for the first time in your environment, you might be surprised about how many things.
Sure. Yeah.
Particularly how many critical vulnerabilities exist.
Yeah, okay.
And it can get overwhelming, I guess. And you have a page in front of you that says you've got X critical vulnerabilities. But there are some prioritization things you could do. So obviously one is helping understand what's actually in your network. Is the host publicly facing that? Does it have internet services running on it?
Yep.
If so, probably much more a priority.
Yep.
Particularly if there's vulnerabilities that are in the publicly running system, patching those first is usually pretty key.
Yep.
Sort of understanding the context of the environment, what that system is used for, and assigning as a risk profile to it. So how critical is this asset in the environment? How critical is the vulnerability exists on it? A system that's internal only has some criticals is probably something you would patch later than something that's publicly facing that has criticals.
Sure.
So just understanding that kind of stuff.
Okay. And you sort of touched on some there, but are there any other pain points that you'd kind of highlight that typically you come across?
We come across a lot of false positives.
Okay.
So particularly when you're using a network-based scanner, there's two ways to do it. You can deploy a machine in the environment, run some scans against all the devices that are currently connected to the network. Two ways to do that. You can do what's called credentialed scanning, where you give it credentials to log into another machine and actually do local checks.
Yep.
But if that's not configured, you do an uncredentialed scan. It's really just looking at what's maybe publicly accessible or publicly running, so open ports, open systems, and things that come back from that are often false positives because it's looking at what's self-reported.
Okay.
So if you do a scan against a web server, uncredentialed, and it comes back and says, Apache running X version, it's usually that's the self-reported version, or maybe SSH is running on a port and it's the self-reported version, and it'll basically just match the version. It gets no vulnerabilities against that version. But particularly with the Linux machine, which includes things like that, depending on the operating system, they'll backport patches to an older version of a thing. So the vulnerability doesn't exist, even if the self-reported version is within the scope of, this is a thing that's affected.
Sure.
So the extra step of validating that a vulnerability actually exists is something that sometimes gets missed.
Okay. And, how do we at Security Centric help solve some of those pain points?
That's the big part of what we do is, setting up the scan and running it is one part, but actually taking the output of that into a system and assigning a risk profile to each asset, assigning a criticality to each asset, ordering, basically giving you what order should I patch these in? Where do I start? So that when you go to the page and you view from the top, that's where you start. There's an already assigned priority. Based on what the vulnerability is, what the machine is, where it sits within the network, what data is, and what's the potential for if it does get exploited,
Yep.
can they do next?
Yep.
So taking into account everything with the context of that system and giving it basically priority. No, that's a big part of what we do. It's basically just to make the life easier. When you go to patch something, knowing where to start with the patch is actually increasing security posture much better than if you just start patching things.